Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final round of the fourth annual Equality and Forensics Spring Break Special. Our first speaker, Andrew Liu, is here, and he will be answering the hypothetical. Trump is inspired by former President Andrew Jackson to tell the Supreme Court that he won't obey any decisions he doesn't like while they can go pound sand. How should Congress respond?
How would you like your time signals, Andrew?
I'd like 3 down, just to grace it. That is okay.
Awesome.
Perfect. So is all judges ready? Okay, perfect. In 1832, President or former President Andrew Jackson was quoted saying in a case overturned by the Supreme Court, Judge John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it. Basically directly challenging a judge of the Supreme Court. And by the way, he didn't listen. He just removed all the Indians away from Georgia. But right now, fast forward just 200 years later, and it seems like America is in the same state. Let's turn to right now. Our favorite president, President Donald Trump, has been testing the boundaries to a constitution and also effectively, excessively praising President Andrew Jackson by not only just framing his photo in the White House, but also making direct references and saying if Andrew Jackson existed just a little later, the Civil War wouldn't have even started. But rather, right now, Donald Trump is looking closer and closer and eerily resembling President Andrew Jackson. Because let's turn to the US news, in which they highlight to us just 2 weeks ago that right now President Donald Trump has violated the Constitution and not listened to Supreme Court level judges for nearly 7 instances, basically undermining democracy as a whole and basically undermining the entire Constitution of the United States of America. But it's only when we consider the fact that President Donald Trump is on the verge of violating the basic rights, the freedoms of 340 million Americans globally, and also effectively ending the Constitution on the spot, is when we need to ask today's all-essential question. Trump is inspired by former President Andrew Jackson to tell the Supreme Court that he won't obey their decisions and that he doesn't like while they can go pound sand. How should Congress respond? And the answer is Congress actually has 3 key strategies in which they can implement if Donald Trump really takes his game that far. By first, impeaching our current president. Second, arresting our current president. And finally, by utilizing the National Army in order to remove our president by force. Right now, President Donald Trump would say that he's a pretty important person. But what if he put himself above the Constitution? Let's turn to the Associated Press, in which they tell us on February 11th of 2025 that right now, our United States democracy system is set up with the checks and balances. Essentially, the 3 branches, the judicial, the executive, and basically the Congress, can have a checks and balances system. Well, if one branches violates their powers, the other 2 will essentially check and make sure that they aren't. And that has happened in multiple instances in the past, where presidents violate their power and the other 2 branches have to step in and mitigate that. But let's further turn to a solution proposed by the Harvard Law Review on March 6th of 2024, that right now, Congress can indeed impeach presidents if they take it too far out of their power. Let's turn to right now what Congress can do, and that is file charges against high crimes and misdemeanors, basically meaning that Congress can effectively remove Donald Trump from office by just effectively filing an impeachment. And a simple vote can really just determine if Donald Trump is really going to stay in office. So the first key strategy is that right now, Congress, all they got to do is just file for impeachment and impeach President Donald Trump. as this has happened in the past for multiple other presidents. But second, that right now, President Donald Trump might be the world's most famous criminal. In fact, he's got 34 felonies convicted upon him. While he may be the most famous, he's also the most powerful. Because right now, President Donald Trump, as the president of the United States, if he were to continue to be as the president and not listen to Congress impeaching him, then they would have to arrest him, which is the second key strategy. Let's turn to Reuters, in which they tell us just a few years ago that right now, that back then, President Richard Nixon was originally going to be arrested on charges of fraud, and basically that the police could arrest President Richard Nixon. But right now, let's turn to a solution proposed by the Wilson Center just 3 days ago that if President Donald Trump were to not listen to an impeachment by Congress, then Congress can utilize and file to the Department of Justice to have arrest warrant upon President Donald Trump, also effectively ending his power and effectively ending his seat on the president. But while maybe Donald Trump might not even listen to that, it might utilize force to keep him into power, which honestly sounds like authoritarian regimes. So that's the third key strategy, is that Congress can implement a military force to remove President Donald Trump from office if needed. Let's turn further to CNN, in which they tell us on January 3rd of 2021 that right now, currently in the January 6th precedent overturning on the raid of Capitol Hill, President Donald Trump was reportedly saying to his secretaries that he could use military force to take away ballots and to rerun the election, essentially rerunning the Constitution and effectively deterring it. But rather, we can turn to a solution proposed by the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace on March 26th of 2025, that right now, if President Donald Trump were to actually use the National Army to do this, then other generals, like generals have done in the past, can really just veto it and have Congress essentially arrest Donald Trump using national security force, because the National Army doesn't listen to President Donald Trump, but rather the Constitution. And that is something that the Congress can more control than Donald Trump. So turning back to today's question, Trump is inspired by former President Andrew Jackson to tell the Supreme Court that he won't obey their decisions, and that he doesn't like while they can go pound sand. How should Congress respond? And Congress can respond with three key strategies. First, by impeaching Donald Trump. Second, by arresting Donald Trump. And finally, by using a national security force to make sure Donald Trump is not in office. So while President Andrew Jackson may have used his power to remove the Cherokee Nation, President Donald Trump may have to use the same power to stay in office. Thank you.
The time was 7:34.
Speaker number 1, Andrew Liu, will now be cross-examined by speaker number 7, Chika Ugorji, for a period of 3 minutes.
How would y'all like your time signals for that?
If I can...
Is it alright if I self-time?
Yeah, but I want to make sure that both of y'all can get the right amount of time.
Just every single minute.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Perfect. All right.
That was a great speech. I just have a couple questions for you. So let's start off with your background. You say Trump is violating the constitutional law, but do you have any tangible examples of how he's doing that?
Well, currently, let's turn to just a few days ago when President Donald Trump literally just deported a Venezuelan gang that were rightful citizens of the United States, when a judge literally said to not do that a few hours earlier. So essentially, President Donald Trump just deported these people outside of the United States illegally and unconstitutionally.
How did Trump do that?
Well, President Donald Trump really just forced them to leave by plane and forced them by a president executive order rather than listening to the judge and stopping them from being deported from the country.
Okay, now let's move on to your first point. You say that Congress could simply just impeach the president, but they have already tried to impeach the president and that failed. And also, Republicans control the Senate currently, and you need 2/3 of votes for a president to be impeached. How is this gonna how likely is this even gonna be the impeachment gonna happen?
Well, we can turn to right now that even though Republican senators actually control the Senate or the Congress, but rather that senators also are not President Donald Trump. We can see multiple instances of people in the Republican Party openly criticizing President Donald Trump for abusing his power. So if President Donald Trump were to really not listen to Supreme Court judges and basically tell them to pound sand, Congress members would even Republican Congress members or senators would turn to the side of impeaching President Donald Trump because senators don't want a president that is violating the Constitution every single day that they are in office.
Has impeachment, when was the last time impeachment has actually worked?
Impeachment, while it hasn't worked on President Donald Trump's last term, it has worked on many other terms, including an impeachment that was going to happen to Richard Nixon that eventually had him resign. So we can see that rather, while impeachments sometimes do not work, they can pressure the president into resigning, and that impeachments are the first legal way that the United States Congress can streamline the process of removing the president.
But seeing that Trump is already pretty widely criticized by the American people and also internationally, wouldn't pressure not work on him?
But where are you getting the fact that currently President Donald Trump is pressured by American people? Or because President Donald Trump's approval ratings are currently really well. We're thinking hypothetically, what happens if he actually unconstitutionally violates the Constitution every single day and tells the Supreme Court to go pound sand?
Thank you. That was a great process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, judges, I will be listening to the next speakers and then crossing them.
All right. Yep. And then Chica, you can go back to draw to prep your speech.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is here, Ian Chang, and he will be answering the hypothetical. Elon Musk's new magic hobby causes the entire San Francisco Bay Area to disappear and reappear in Texas. How should the state of California find a new source of tax revenue?
Hi. May I ask who will be giving me time signals?
How would you like those?
Yeah, could I get a 5? Could I get a 5 down? C at 6:30, fifth to 7, T at 7:15.
Awesome. Yeah, let me just finish typing the question. Awesome.
Can I get a thumbs up from all my judges when we're all ready? In a bombshell deal after the NBA trade deadline, Luka Doncic, star point guard formerly on the Dallas Mavericks, was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, seen as a massive fleece and steal by the team based in Los Angeles. But then, a little noticed detail is that Luka missed the opportunity to sign a max deal with the Mavericks, losing him $133 million. And that's not even including the fact that he moved from Texas, a state with no tax, to California, a one with lots of taxes. An article from Smart Assets contextualizes on January 1st of 2025 that California's current top marginal tax rate is 13.3%, On the other hand, Texas's tax rate is zero. Its citizens pay no source of income tax, and as a result, people get to keep their money. And according to the Extemp prep room just 30 minutes ago, Elon Musk just abracadabraed San Francisco into Texas, saying goodbye to a massive city in California. But it's considering that California in 2024 took in $40 billion in tax. It's of great economic importance to ask the hypothetical today. Elon Musk's new magic hobby causes the entire San Francisco Bay Area to disappear and reappear in Texas. How should the state of California find a new source of tax revenue? And the answer is to adopt the approach of several tax-free havens in these three sectors. First, tourism. Second, an airport or departure tax. And finally, fixing the problem with corporate taxing. As much as we like to hate on California for it being dirty and having to have too many cars, they're still a pretty decent city for tourism. And the best way to deal with it is to leverage that. How the state of California can find a new sort of tax revenue in lieu of San Francisco is by leveraging its tourism. An article from CBS News articulates on January 18th, 2025, that tourism in San Francisco is a growing industry. In 2024, it is expected to make $10 billion and bring in 23 million visitors to the state. And this shows its greater importance in California rather than just taxes. And so, the solution is for Los Angeles and other major California cities still there to take the approach of Monaco, which pays no taxes. As an article from Credence Research quantifies on August 7th, 2024, its tourism industry brings $6 billion a year, spearheaded by the F1 or Formula One racing event, the Monaco Grand Prix. So, cities like Los Angeles can do something like this, leveraging sports events, whether it be the NBA All-Star Game, or even better, hosting a street race in Hollywood. And that will bring massive prestige to the city. Because Hollywood and Monaco are of similar prestigious activity. So high prices will be justified, and this will make Los Angeles and the rest of California a sports haven while making up for the lost money that San Francisco loses with it. But it's not just about a maxed out tourism industry. It's about leveraging that even further as well. The second way how the state of California can find a new source of tax revenue is by imposing an airport or departure tax. As an article from Statista tells us, on May 28th, 2024, California is one of the largest flight destinations in the entire world, handling upwards of 2,000 flight operations every single day. And that, unfortunately, will decrease greatly without San Francisco, because there's lost revenue from airlines who won't pay the tax to the government, and also a lack of people coming in without San Francisco. So the solution is for Los Angeles to once again take advantage of this, Los Angeles and the rest of California to deal with this and take an approach of Barbados, which, as an article from Investopedia tells us, on December 30th, 2024, that Barbados levies an airport tax, which is about $70 to every consumer that flies internationally, and this is added to the price of their airplane tickets. The thing is, the United States and California already have that. The difference is that the airlines get this money rather than the state government. So, if this money is redirected towards the California state government, it will make up a significant percentage of the tourism lost, because the government will have the money that they lose from not having San Francisco anymore. And because Los Angeles and the rest of California is still a rather attractive destination, even without San Francisco, this solution will be rather effective. But finally, some people call California the bluest and the most democratic state ever. And this final solution feeds into that, which is fixing the problem with corporate tax. An article from the New York Times explains on January 21st, 2024, that taxing the wealthy has always been tough. In the whole world lost upwards of $5 trillion because companies and wealthy individuals are evading tax in very specific ways. So, because there's still so many companies in California, even without the Bay Area, such as Apple and Google, that are still based in non-Bay Area Californian areas, The solution is for California to take advantage of what they already have, and that is by adopting a new tax system. That's Estonia, because as their own governmental website, Invest in Estonia explains on an unnamed date, their current tax system has a 20% corporate tax rate, but then it's only levied if companies there make enough money. So if California adopts this kind of tax strategies, they have all these billion-dollar companies continuing to pay tax because it's friendlier towards the businesses. And because there's a margin for them to make profit, they're more inclined to stay in California rather than move to other areas. Since the Bay Area in San Francisco, especially Silicon Valley, has had several companies moving out of it, it's time for Los Angeles to lock them up right. It's time for Los Angeles and other California cities to lock them up right there and then. And this will bring them lots of money and keep business operations in the region. But considering that California took in $40 billion in tax last year, it is imperative to return to today's hypothetical. Elon Musk's new magic hobby causes the entire San Francisco Bay Area to disappear and reappear in Texas. How should the state of California find a new source of tax revenue? The answer is by adopting the approach of several tax-free havens. First, tourism. Second, a departure tax. And finally, corporate tax.
Awesome. The time was 7:04.
Thanks so much.
Just a reminder to everyone in the room that competitors don't need to be using any other materials like while giving their speech, so they shouldn't have their flow or anything.
Speaker number 2, Ian Chang, will now be cross-examined by speaker number 1, Andrew Liu, for a period of 3 minutes.
Okay, so for time signals for cross, could I just get just every single minute? Yeah, thank you. When my opponent and my judges are both ready. Okay. Ian, congratulations for making it to finals. That was a great speech. Let's turn to your third point right now. Currently, your third point is about corporations. Now, if all the corporates are located in the Bay Area, what would happen if those corporates were to be moved to Texas? How would California generate any income?
Because the thing is, I argued in my point that companies, they may operate in the Bay Area, but then they're not based there. So California still has the leverage to keep some of them in. And that's why they need to impose a new tax system. So that's why they can keep them in and prevent them from actually moving to Texas. But that's already happening from the Bay Area. Companies are moving to Texas.
So basically what you're saying is that right now California is basically losing Silicon Valley to Texas, and now that California can still tax them?
That's not really what's there. This tax system specifically imposes a tax only if a company increases or rather surpasses this particular sum of profits. So that's still very corporate friendly, and that would incline them to stay there.
Okay, perfect. Now for your second point on airports. Now, how much tax does airports generate?
Airports probably generate lots of tax because if you see some flight tickets are insanely expensive, ranging to thousands of dollars. And the figure is pretty hard to calculate because, like I said, lots of these taxes, especially the airport tax paid in the United States, most of those go to airlines rather than governments.
Is there a quantifiable number?
I have not found that.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, and now let's turn to your first point on tourism. Now, exactly where is tourism mostly located in California?
Lots of tourism likely happens in Los Angeles. That's where it's most popular.
That's perfect. Now, you're saying that tourism generates about $10 billion. How much is $10 billion compared to the actual tax revenue that California gets every single year?
That $10 billion is still a non-taxable number. And as I said in my statement of significance, California brings in about $40 billion of tax revenue. So then that 10 billion number still be smaller compared to that relative amount.
So I think $40 billion is a little underestimate. But so basically all three of these points added together, does it add above the amount of tax that California is currently getting?
It depends on how successful these things are. Like for example, that corporation tax system, it depends on how successful it is. And later also about that solution about an F1 race in Hollywood, that also depends on how much success it'll get. So it's relative, so it has the potential to reach these amounts, but it depends on how it develops in the long term.
Okay, perfect. What is stopping Texas from stealing F1 too?
What is Texas already has an F1 race in Austin. So if California already makes its own, that will allow them to actually compete with them, and that'll be a viable solution.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, and that was a great speech.
Thank you.
Judges, is it okay if I spectate, or should I just leave?
Yep, that's fine. You can spectate.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. All right, everyone. Our next speaker will be Daniel Chung, speaking on the hypothetical. In an attempt to cut costs, Doge gets rid of the entire military. Is America still safe?
Who will be giving my time signals? All right. Could I get the same ones as round 4, please?
Can you remind me what those were?
Yes. 2 at 5, 1 at 6, hook at 6:30, fist at 7, raise fist at 7:30, please.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thank you. All right. Are we all ready? Recently, billionaire playboy Elon Musk, to safe to say, has not been doing the best of jobs in his job at the Department of Government Efficiency. As in his task to cut costs, it could be equated to his random car, the Tesla. Not because his job is new or efficient, but because his job recently has been an absolute disaster fire. Just recently, we're seeing that his overall Department of Government Efficiency, when trying to cut costs in the government, have not really put a dent in the bucket at all. And now there is major questions or concerns of exactly where he could go next to potentially try to cut major costs. So hypotheticals are absolutely in play. But one major asset in which he could cut costs could be our military. And when we consider the Peter G. Peterson Foundation on January 4th of 2024 would explain that in the fiscal year of 2023, we spent $773 billion in defense alone, and much more money in many other facets of our military. In today's all-important hypothetical, we answer today's question. In an attempt to cut costs, Doge cuts the entire military. Is America still safe? To which we answer no, because of first, how threats in our nation and close to it are now much more vulnerable. Second, how our allies are much more susceptible towards opposing threats. And third, how we're seeing that opposing nuclear arsenals make sure the United States no longer is in the negotiation table at all. Now, the United States overall has a major usage for our military. And although our police force usually helps us internally, the military is an absolute huge asset, which is our first point. As to why the United States, if they cut the entire military, would not still be safe, is because the United States' problems within the country and close to it would be much more vulnerable. Let's first look at one major reason that happened internally in our country. January 6th. As according to the National Guard Bureau, on just January 8th of 2021, when they were briefing about the National Guard's overall help in protecting those Congress people that were being under threat by rioters and protesters up in Capitol Hill. Although the National Guard that goes under the military wasn't the only force protecting these Congress people, if they were not there, they would be a major asset of protection that was lost. But this absolutely is lost if we cut our military. It's also a similar story when we consider when it comes overall of protection of issues that are close to our country, such as drug trafficking in other neighboring countries. The Atlantic Council would explain on January 18th of this year that the Donald Trump administration currently seeks to use strike forces that stay within our military to try to curb Mexican drug cartels that are trafficking drugs. Which means that the military, although is not the governing force or the internally prominent force in these major violent protest issues of salvation, we're also seeing that the military is a major asset to help make sure that these sorts of problems are solved much more efficiently. Which means that if we cut the military, we lose a massive asset of protection the United States could use to make sure that our problems internally and near our country are a lot less vulnerable. Therefore, America becomes a lot less safe because this asset is no longer available. Now, there is an argument that the United States could use our allies in order to protect ourselves. But if we cut the entire military, then the amount of allies we can depend on to protect ourselves from opposing enemies is the same amount of numbers that we have in Elon Musk's brain cells, which is 0. Because our second point as to why if we cut the entire military, America is still not safe, is because our allies are much more susceptible towards opposing threats. Let's look at this from first, exactly our well-known alliance that is NATO. The United States has been a major power player within NATO, although they don't represent the entirety of this alliance. As according to Foreign Policy magazine, on just August 22nd of last year, the United States essentially, if they were to leave NATO, NATO itself could not exist at all. And although technically they would still exist as an alliance, what this essentially means is that opposing countries such as Russia would have a lot easier time to get what they wanted out of these alliances and opposing grounds without the United States' superpower military presence. But if the United States in this hypothetical cuts its military, it's essentially the same thing as them not really having much of a presence in defense as a whole. Therefore, opposing countries such as Russia bulldoze across our alliances and make sure that NATO no longer could protect us, but also couldn't protect other Western countries as a whole. This also is a similar story when it comes to economic and democratic partners that we seek trade and overall relationships with. This is according to just NBC News. On just June 20th of this last year, we're seeing that countries such as South Korea, Japan, Australia, Ukraine, and Israel are all under major protection from the United States in some form of aid when it comes to military, indirect, or indirect instances, which means that if we get rid of this military altogether, these major aids in trade or just relationships are all lost. These opposing partners and countries are a lot stronger than our allies could ever be. Now, since World War II, we've seen the term of mutually assured destruction, or since the Cold War. But it seems that if we get rid of our military, it's not going to be mutually assured, just one-sided. It's our third point as to why if we get rid of our entire military, America is still not safe. It's because, overall, the nuclear arsenals of opposing countries will make us no longer on the negotiation table. Let's explore when it comes to overall mutual assured destruction. This is according to the United States Department of Defense. They see land, sea, and air when it comes to our nuclear arsenal as a major deterrent against opposing countries that seek to do major amounts of harm to the United States and its allies as a whole. So though our nuclear arsenal that falls under our military expense is not actively used on a daily basis, it's used as a negotiation chip when it comes to all instances. Which means that if we shrink and abolish our nuclear arsenal, we essentially doom ourselves in any sort of negotiation. In fact, according to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists on just June 20th of last year, we're seeing that if the United States were to abolish its nuclear arsenal, we essentially go boom with just one wrong step. Even if the United States somehow negotiated with other opposing countries to abolish their nuclear arsenals, we go under threat of great power conflict as well. In either direction, by abolishing our nuclear arsenals that fall under our military, we no longer have a safe seat at the negotiation table, but rather have to hide in our nuclear bunkers because essentially we are doomed for quite some boon. And so, when we go back to today's all-important hypothetical question, in an effort to save and cut costs, we get rid of our entire military. Is America still safe? We answered no, because of first, how it protects us and overall in our country and other neighboring countries. And second, how our allies are susceptible towards incoming threats from opposing countries. And third, how nuclear options and opposing countries will no longer give us negotiation table options. And so, it seems unfortunately cutting costs in this hypothetical would not help us when it comes to national security. Thank you.
Time was 7:20.
Speaker number 3, Daniel Chun, will be cross-examined by speaker number 2, which was Ian Chang.
How would you like your time signals for cross?
Can I just get a 2 down?
Cool.
Yeah. All right, first off, Daniel, congrats on the great speech. Just a question. Let's go to your first point first. With the point about drug trafficking, hasn't the military been really ineffective, especially in Mexico, when dealing with drugs in general?
Sure. So as I said in my speech, although the military isn't prominent when it comes to these issues, such as drug trafficking, such as national security when it comes to our internal organizations, once again, they're a major asset of protection. So by getting rid of our military, we get rid of a massive tool that could be used for protection.
But then, especially in Mexico, drug cartels, especially the Sinaloa, aren't really that scared of the military. In regimes before AMLO's, they were constantly fighting them, only fighting bloody wars, and that's only changed in recent years. How would that affect that?
Sure. So when the question asks, is America still safe? We would say absolutely not, because we get rid of any sort of protection as a whole. Even if it is inefficient within Mexico in battling these drug cartels, by getting rid of any sort of effort of resistance, we essentially are a lot less safe regardless.
Right. Okay, on to your third point. Just because Doge just suddenly cuts all nuclear funding doesn't mean the United States still have massive amounts of bombs. Why does that mean they have less leverage?
Sure. So by getting rid of our overall funding for the nuclear arsenals and being able to actually regulate them and making sure that they're up to standard, we make ourselves at a lot lower of a vantage point when these other countries are continuing to try to develop our nuclear arsenals. By slowing down rather than speeding up, these other countries once again have a much higher leverage point on the negotiation table.
But that doesn't change the fact the United States still has nukes. They still have lots of them. Even the very smallest nuke or the most oldest one still can be incredibly destructive. Doesn't that mean the United States still has leverage?
Sure. So when it comes to actual regulation and making sure that once again we have this sort of power, the other countries can have a lot more of a leverage when it comes to continuing to develop these nukes. And overall, when we see that we're no longer trying to actually fund them, it makes it a lot harder for us to make sure to deter other countries from developing their own nuclear arsenals.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You still have another minute.
Oh,
Unless you ran out of questions, and that's fine. But I thought
yeah,
you.
yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay. I thought you read my time signals wrong. I'm sorry.
Everyone, the next speaker is Kabir Rai, who will be answering the hypothetical. The Metropolitan Police revealed that they have incontrovertible evidence that King Charles III was Jack the Ripper. Can the British monarchy survive this?
All right, Paul, are you giving time signals?
No, Raven is.
I'll be giving time signals.
Oh, okay, give me 1 second. I think I need to pin you here.
In the meantime, how would you like your time signals?
Just 5 down, C at 6:30, and then fist breaks.
Awesome.
Right, sounds perfect. Whenever y'all are ready. British people can be oddly patriotic. I mean, just about a year ago, someone in one of Britain's most patriotic days decided that they would get a British design on their beard. And while they may have posted on Facebook that God save the Queen, their horrible puns are about as equal as the amount of power that the British monarchy has right now. Because it's just that. God save the Queen refers to the only care of influence that's left for the British monarchy. The University of Central London, right? It's just 3 days ago that as much as the British monarch would like to claim that Britain is stronger than ever, their influence is quickly waning, and people are starting to think whether or not they're even monarchs anymore, given that they don't have the same influence that they had just 40 years ago. And while this may seem like another period in which democracy finally beats monarchies, the impact is a lot more severe than any of us would think. And so it's considering that the National Center for Social Studies writes just 6 days ago that since 1983, polls for support of the monarchy's existence in the first place have dropped by 32%, meaning that one more controversy could destroy the monarchy as we know it. It becomes absolutely imperative that we tune into Paul Robinson or whichever diabolical demon wrote this question. Ask today's question. The Metropolitan Police find incontrovertible evidence that King Charles III was Jack the Ripper. Can the British monarchy survive this? And the answer is absolutely not, because it gives everyone the opportunity to tear it all down. First, because it explodes political tensions. Second, because it gets rid of all public support. And finally, because nobody will want to take up the job after Jack the Ripper is out of his office. Now, I think that we should start this lesson as all with history class, as we start with the Roman Empire, where they were still a strong nation when they were taken out by the barbarians. But the problem is that when controversy starts to begin, you can quickly find that there's barbarians or politicians. I can't tell the difference about banging on your outside gates. And that's why the first reason that the monarchy won't be able to survive Charles the Ripper, I just did that there, is because they're going to lose all their protection against exploding political tensions, which has been a severe problem as of right now. The New Statesman found on April 3rd of 2024 that political tensions have been rising between the parliament and, of course, the monarch, as they've been restricting their power, but not only that, their influence. As just recently, the British Parliament decided that they get to decide where and where not the king can go visit different cities inside the UK, therefore signifying that political tensions are only growing more amongst the parliament and the monarch that controls Britain. But all it needs is one controversy or one serial killer in the British monarchy to tear it all down. And that's why the Republic campaign told us on March 5th of 2025 that they're already looking to pass legislations to abolish the monarchy, but they need some real evidence to prove that the monarchy is detrimental to the British government's credibility. Well, you have a serial killer in the monarchy. I think that's enough evidence. It's because they've been looking for the opportunity to take away the monarchy, and this is the perfect chance that the monarchy won't be able to survive Charles the Ripper. But I think another reason that not only my history class, but these specific monarchs are falling apart in the modern day is because they aren't adaptable. I mean, look at the other history idea that's better than mine, oversimplified, in which the YouTube channel shows not King Charles talking about cancer, but King Henry VIII as a bloated animated character. And let's just say that just like the comparison between my history channel and their history channel, oversimplified probably has more subscribers than the British monarch. And that's why the second reason that the British monarch will fall apart as a result of Charles the Ripper is simply because of waning public support. Newsweek found 3 days ago that their polls that indicate how much the people support the monarch and their moral standing has dropped by 8 points. And while I don't fully understand British ranking systems, the way they wrote it makes it seem like that's a lot. But that simple drop in their support means that when the government comes knocking on their door, the British people won't want to support that history. And that's why the Daily Mail found 1 day ago that even when the government goes against the monarch, most of the time there's people supporting the monarch's existence who are willing to keep it alive. But now, with nobody willing to support the monarch in the first place, the government has free reign as to how much it will prosecute not just King Charles or Jack the Ripper, but the entire monarch as a whole. But I'm getting tired of all the history talk, so let's switch from YouTube oversimplified to Netflix, where we're watching The Lion King, where Simba is singing, "Oh, I just can't wait to be king." Here's the problem: he isn't British. And that's why the final reason that the British monarch won't survive a controversy like King Charles being Jack the Ripper is because nobody will want to step up to be king in the first place. And that's already been discussed. The Town and Country magazine found on February 3rd of 2025 that there's already concerns about King Charles' health, regardless of whether or not he's Jack the Ripper. And that simply means that people are starting to think that the future of the monarchy is in question. And when they'll have to take on this lack of credibility and shoulder the burden of Jack the Ripper being in the very same office, people don't necessarily want to inhabit a haunted house. And that's why Reuters found just 3 days ago that the biggest problem the monarch is facing is that even if Prince William gets it right after King Charles, after that, people will no longer want to take on the challenge of being a rich monarch and would rather live a normal life where they don't face the challenges as a result. It's because the monarch is falling apart from within, and nobody will bring forward those things, that the monarch won't be able to survive another controversy or Jack the Ripper. So it was considering that there was a crisis within the monarchy that meant people didn't even want it to exist anymore. That we took Paul Robinson's mind out of this world and asked today's question. The Metropolitan Police finds incontrovertible evidence that King Charles III was Jack the Ripper. can the British monarchy survive this? And the answer was no. First, because of political tension. Second, because of public support. And finally, because nobody will step up in the monarchy. So, while it might be obvious that beard patterns with the British flag are creative enough, there's going to be a creative solution as to whether or not we can fight controversy like this question and make sure that the best things and the most important cultivated history are here to stay.
726.
Speaker number 4 will now be cross-examined by speaker number 3, Daniel Chung.
How would y'all like your time signals?
The 2 down is fine. Thank you. Okay. First off, congrats on an amazing speech. That was really funny.
Nice.
Okay, but to start off with a couple questions. So on your first point on political question on tension, why would controversies essentially just abolish the monarchy or at least make it not survive? When you've already listed that there is constraints from Parliament on the monarchy, why couldn't they just continue to constrain it rather than just simply ceasing to exist?
So I understand your point, but what I was saying was they are already looking for the opportunity to abolish the monarchy, but they haven't gotten enough reason to do so. Now with the controversy like this, they have all the reasoning they need to blow up the entire monarchy.
Okay, now moving on to your second point, which is public support. If King Charles was Jack the Ripper, why does one bad apple spoil the bunch for the rest of the history of the monarchy?
Because that's the way the people perceive it. Even if it's not right, the people won't support the monarchy if the monarchy has supported Jack the Ripper. It's pretty much that simple.
Sure, but if we've seen in history within the English monarch, such as King Henry VIII that killed a lot of his wives, why haven't we seen that type of history actually relate to actual non-public support for the monarchy within England? Wouldn't this have ended a lot sooner?
No, but all I'm saying is Henry VIII didn't have a parliament that was trying to remove him. What I'm saying
Sure,
is,
but this is about public support. Wouldn't public support be
what
a
I'm
lot
saying is
sooner?
the people aren't going to try and preserve the monarchy if something goes south. That's what I'm saying. There's not enough support that people are going to actively try to make sure that it's here to stay. So anyone can do anything with the monarchy, and 90% of the people there won't care.
Okay, moving on to your third point about no one would like to take up the job. Could you at least explain one more time exactly why no one would like to take up the job?
So I basically said that I use the haunted house analogy, but generally, if the entire house has been a place which has now been marked with the fact that there was a serial killer there, like the credibility of the whole institution, it's like being the son of a criminal, right? Everyone now associates you with that criminal identity, and that isn't something that people necessarily want to take up.
But considering that English monarchy, I'm just going to touch up on this again, that English monarch history isn't the most clean, as we've seen previous monarchs have very bad intentions in the past. Why would this sort of controversy stop future generations from living in this haunted house?
Yeah, but the problem is the transition on the public opinion of the British monarchy has changed gradually. But now with something this drastic, that change would be more drastic and nobody would want to step up. Like it's very gradually been accepted that what King Henry VIII or whoever else did was really bad, but that's been accumulated knowledge over like 10, 20, 30 years. Now it could go all down in a day.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thanks, good questions.
Let's welcome our next speaker, Jalen Fields, who will be answering the hypothetical. If I can find it. Members of Congress are too busy learning the alphabet to realize that they accidentally gave NASA the military budget. Are their projects still chronically delayed?
They what the military budget?
They accidentally gave NASA the military budget.
If all the judges are ready, may I begin?
Would you like any time signals?
Yes. If you count down from 5, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Okay. This just in, our ever incompetent Congress members have yet again failed to make a budget, but this time giving over $895 billion of funding to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. This, although it'd be funny, would likely receive a lot of backlash by both the American public and the government, because although they may not know their alphabets now, whenever they figure it out and learn how to read, I don't think members of Congress would really like to give that much money to space exploration or sciences in general after seeing what's been happening in the world recently. So, historically, NASA has been regarded as too big to fail, a statement that often resembles what the United States government views of the banking industry. Seeing that if something at NASA or banking, if it failed, that all that money would go to waste and potentially society would crumble. What actually happens here in regards to NASA is that according to ex-administrative executive at NASA and now defense secretary, the entire job of a project manager at NASA is entirely to get a project approved, no matter whatever they have to say, whenever they have to say, or who they say it to. Because as soon as a project at NASA becomes approved, they instantly receive all of the funding for the remainder of their project. According to Science News, hypothetically, if a project was greenlit at $1 billion, then down the line, that project, after being delayed due to inexperience, due to being delayed to terrible management, or due to unforeseen circumstances, that project would continue to receive funding of upwards of $2 billion. So considering all of this, it's clear to see why NASA has all these funding delays. But if they were hypothetically given $895 billion, the current military budget, due to a Congress mishap, would their projects continue to be delayed? The answer to this question is a strong maybe, because it depends on how the question works. If this is for a 1-year project, almost no NASA mission has ever been greenlit and operated within a single year. Instead, it takes multiple years of funding and development for a NASA project to actually happen. For any project to reasonably happen, it takes multiple years. On average, according to Forbes, it takes 33 months for a NASA project to be up and operational. So, with the caveat that they continue to receive this funding forever, will it continue to be delayed? And the answer to that is no, for a couple reasons. Due to their previous administrative work, they've always intentionally been delayed. And the Government Office of Accountability recognizes that and sees that and doesn't like that a lot. So if they were given this funding, it's very likely that they'd see this funding as a tool to no longer have to do this. And all their future projects would likely work and be on time for once. But if this was only limited to a single year, then according to Forbes, they would likely invest over $600 billion into speculative projects, and they would invest into things that they couldn't uphold over multiple years. Forbes lists 5 things that science, if given the government's military budget, could achieve. 3 of these things are achievable by NASA. 2 of them are great societal achievements, but aren't related to NASA. These being a nuclear fission reactor, which could provide infinite energy for people. After studying how the sun works, and then further studying nuclear fission in space, they'd likely be able to uncover the secrets behind this unexplored technology. The second of which is a Great Hubble telescope, which holds unforeseen knowledge that the United States has never before had access to. The Hubble telescope made numerous extremely important observations, but none of them had enough funding to ship another one, a better Hubble telescope. And the third one is up to 4 potential colonies on Mars. With $600 billion, a permanent settlement on Mars could be achieved, not by Mr. Musk with SpaceX, but by NASA instead. If given the proper government funding, this is an achievable and understandable goal. They have the opportunity to throw out all these poor practices. NASA has the opportunity to disregard all the poor practices that they've been forced into doing to receive continued funding. These practices, as I previously stated, are destructive and result in public backlash towards NASA by the GOA and by the public whenever they see that a project promised for 2026 is only now being given the chance to be finished in 2028. Out of all of these things, most, if not all of them, could be reduced. And instead of playing political football with NASA's budget, according to a Science Direct article, they could instead give them the proper funding to actually achieve their goals. Instead of playing political football and only giving NASA their proper funding 7 times throughout the past 50 years, they could instead get so much more done and accomplish so many great things for society. And so no, if this was continued, they would receive great and understandable, incredible achievements. Thank you.
The time was 7:19.
Speaker number 5, Jalen Fields, will now be cross-examined by speaker number 4, Kabi Rai.
What would you like your time signals for that?
Same as last time, 2 down.
Awesome.
Okay, first of all, congrats on a great speech. I just had a couple questions. So, first of all, on your time frame argument, where you said that you were saying that it maybe depends on the time frame. Wouldn't it be assumed that at some point the funding would be removed, like within the first year?
Yeah, and I think I went into this quite a bit. If they were given funding for only a singular year, then this would drastically worsen the current circumstances of NASA.
So,
it would increase.
Okay, but if we take you on your other argument where you said that in the event that the funding is permanent, doesn't it all, or in that first year argument where you said that it will worsen it, right? Doesn't the R&D, like the research and development, already exist, and then the only deficit is actually building those projects?
I'm not entirely sure I understand your question.
So you were saying that it would hurt to have that for only 1 year, but don't we already have the research, and then most of the problem is just actually building those projects that NASA's talking about?
Well, whenever NASA's funding is actually decreased, they've either canceled projects, they've indefinitely delayed them, or we've seen delays of up to 3 years, which is completely different from their average delay of up to 12 months. So whenever their funding is actually decreased, they increase their delays by 2 to indefinite amount of years. So if this is decreased by $900 billion, it's assumed that they may not ever be able to recover.
But that's what I'm saying. In that 1 year, if they increase that funding by $865 million, as you said, then wouldn't that increase the amount of projects they'd finish, because they already have the research, right?
They largely, only some projects currently have the proper research, and only some projects currently need the actual funding. A lot of the research needed to be done comes from the funding. And what you're misconstruing here is the fact that whenever is the idea that the funding that they're being given would be enough to complete a project within a single year, which it simply isn't able to be done.
Okay, then on the permanent argument, if we're both agreeing that there isn't enough research on these projects, then doesn't that still continue the backlog and all of these different projects still be indefinitely delayed because we're spending time on research?
Well, what I'm saying is NASA has been practically lying to the American public and to Congress to get projects greenlit because they know that as soon as it gets greenlit, that they'll receive additional funding to be able to complete the project. So,
but the question is whether or not the funding would make NASA's projects actually happen. I'm asking, wouldn't that funding just not have the impact that you're saying it would?
if this funding is continued, they have no reason to lie and no reason to continuously shorten the time frame whenever they are aware, according to a previous NASA administrator, that they can't get it actually done within the time. They have no reason to continue these poor practices.
Is that time?
Thank you so much
Good
for your
speech.
question.
Yeah, good speech.
My dad is speaking right now, and calling someone, and I'm gonna like, let me pull up. Can you hear my dad right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Is it possible to do it somewhere else, or is that just not an option?
Let me hit 4.
If it's not an option, it's not an option, but
No, I mean, it depends on my little brother. Will you be quiet, Casey? Fine. Okay. Okay, my little brother will, I guess, be quiet.
Okay.
Let me get something real quick.
Would you like your time signals? No? Okay.
For my time signals, I would like every single minute, please. But can I also self time?
Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps I should move this somewhere.
Our sixth speaker today is Chika Ugorji, who will be answering the hypothetical. Kim Jong-un gets tired of being a dictator and retires to spend more time skiing. Who will be his successor?
Let me just. Okay. I'm gonna be inside long. Is this alright? Can I self time?
Yes, you can still time.
Okay. My time starts on my first word. North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un kind of seems out of touch of reality. In fact, he told North Koreans to start eating less food inside of 2025, when North Koreans are already starving. That's like telling him to stop eating more food. Now, it's not now because his bag is so big. That's probably why he decided to quit being a dictator. According to Cap, quite frankly, just 30 minutes ago, Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator, decides to stop being the dictator and start sitting, which leaves us with a couple options for who will be his successor. And this is absolutely imperative, as whoever becomes the successor of North Korea will become also sphere of really large influence inside of Asia. And so far, it seems like it's gonna be between Kim Jong-un and Kim Yo-jong, because those two are the direct descendants of Kim Jong-un's Kim Jong-un's bloodline. And it's one considering that whoever dictates North Korea could potentially make North Korea a global superpower. It makes it absolutely imperative that we answer these hypothetical questions. Kim Jong-un decides to quit being a dictator and start seeing who will be his successor. The answer is Clinton. It became Yo because she has the influence and the ability to become the leader, or more specifically, because of firstly, her political power. Secondly, her ability to get over cultural norms. Third and finally, because she's able to handle foreign policy. Now, to become the successor of North Korea, the first thing you need to have is political power and ability to use it. Which brings us to the first reason on why Kim Jong-un will become the successor of Kim Jong-un. And that's because she has political power and the ability to use it. Because, as the Radio Free Asia explains to us on August 31st of 2024, that she's the leader of the Worker Party of Korea. And the Worker Party of Korea is the absolute party of North Korea, dictating who gets their vote inside elections, which they have no political opposition for, and controlling society. To become the leader of North Korea, the first thing you can do is get the Worker Party of Korea's approval. And Kim Jong-un seems to be the one who has the most power over the Worker Party of Korea, because she is the chairman of propaganda and influence within the party, meaning that she has significant power within the party and approval of the party because she's already head chair. While the other person, Kim Jong-un, North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un's daughter, doesn't exactly have much approval of the party. While she does make appearances with her father, she doesn't exactly have been active inside North Korean politics. While North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un's sister has been. The second reason on why Kim Jong-un will be the North Korean will be the leader of North Korea is because she has the ability to get over cultural norms. You see, as the Journal of Asian and International Studies explains to us on May of 2021, that North Korea usually has male dictators, usually has males inside of power, and usually these males, and that's because North Korea is a Confucianist society. And in doing so, that means that they support patriarchy, which is why all North Korean dictators have been male. And many women don't have political representation and is underrepresented inside the Worker Party of Korea and many political roles. However, Kim Jong-un has the ability to overcome this. As you already stated, she's the chairman of the Workers' Party of Korea and dictates the propaganda and influence internationally, meaning that she has the ability to influence not only the people inside North Korea that she is an able woman, but also she's already been shown to have been approved. While Kim Jong-un has already been criticized for being a woman, especially being so young, 10 years old. You see, a South Korean journalist at Spy Chief said that Kim Jong-un is essentially not able to become the successor because she is a woman. While the other one gets criticized for being a woman, this is significant. The third and final reason on why Kim Jong-un gets to become the leader of North Korea is because she has the ability to handle foreign policy. Handling foreign policy is essential to becoming the dictator of North Korea, because foreign policy is essentially how North Korea still becomes a regime. North Korea has a lot of international pressure, particularly from the U.S. and South Korea. And by handling foreign policy, Kim Jong-un, the current dictator, has been able to release external pressure. And they need the ability to, and the successor needs the ability to do this too. Which is why Kim Jong-un is able to become the successor, because she has already been able to show her ability of using foreign policy. And that's because she controls the media and propaganda inside of North Korea, meaning that she already has the experience. While Kim Jong-un is only 10 years old and hasn't been active inside politics. So, So when we're turning to today's question, that we answer an absolute yes. That we answer that Kim Joo-ae is not going to be president because her auntie is the one with more experience. So while Kim Jong-un may be pretty big back and start skiing, his auntie is going to be the one successful him. Thank you.
The time was 6:55.
Speaker number 6. Speaker number 5, Jalen, please.
Would you like your time signals for cross?
If you could do it every minute, please.
Awesome.
Okay. Stop singing. Okay. Congratulations on your successful speech, and congratulations on making it into finals. I did have a couple questions, though. So you state in your third point that she has the potential to be successful within foreign policy, but the only example that you stated to support this is that she's been successful in domestic policy, in influencing and controlling the propaganda. How well does this relate, and how can that domestic policy correlate to foreign policy? I'm sorry, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. Okay. But essentially, she works for like the Worker Party of Korea, and in that she controls the media and influence. And with that, she already has shown ability to basically be empowered and use use the propaganda foreignly to like bolster North Korea. And also, she like helped North Korea within like inside 2018 with this nuclear summit thingy.
What propaganda is being spread internationally for her to demonstrate this foreign policy ability?
Well, whether it's propaganda inside North Korea or just propaganda that North Korea isn't that bad of a country, yeah, that's one example of propaganda.
Is there anywhere that believes that the narrative that North Korea isn't that bad of a country? It's widespreadly known that the dictatorial situation and the poor living conditions and the lack of food that you mentioned previously, in what way has any sort of propaganda spread outside of North Korea? Who actually believes the narrative?
Well, North Koreans themselves, and I can't exactly give you an exact statistic of North Korean propaganda working, but it has worked within North Korean politics with them trying to like threaten South Korea. South Korean politics and trying to threaten them.
Okay. How old did you say the opposition was?
Kim Jong-un's daughter is 10-year-old. Kim Joo-ae.
What year did the candidate that you believe will win, when did they begin their political career?
I'm not too sure, but she is the sister of Kim Jong-un, and he's like 40-ish, like around then. So I'm assuming that she's significantly older.
If Kim Jong-un's daughter was given was allowed, or if Kim Jong-un chose to go on his little skiing trip later, would the opposing candidate have a potential?
Per chance.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for a great round, and have a great rest of your day.